Well, happy Monday morning, everyone. Happy Markcast Day here. Back normal now, back on Mondays. I think for the duration of the season, we'll figure out, if Jason or Evan have things going on. My schedule is pretty easy during the summer here. Coming off 3 weddings in 5 days, I think. Still watch the games here, driving on my phone, everything. The only one, the Winnipeg-Calgary game, have limited notes on that, but hopefully Jason and Evan will hop on a little bit on that. But crazy weekend here. We'll bring in the crew. It's really starting to feel real here. I don't know if that is any difference here with all the stakes and kind of horrific weekend for Ottawa and Masoli and kind of all that stuff. But it feels a little bit grander than even the XFL or the USFL stuff that we kind of cover. Evan, does that make sense?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, this is week 5 now, so we've done a month of the season. I definitely think, things are starting to formulate, I guess. And we talk about the cream of the crop rising. The teams are really starting to separate themselves. And of course, there's still a lot of time left. I keep saying, 18-game season, 21 weeks. It's a really long time, right? So you can't, we're not at a point where we can say everything is finalized. But yeah, I mean, this weekend's slate of games definitely, I think, gave us a better idea of where some teams are at.
Jason, you were there. We'll start. Normally, we kind of go reverse chronological order, but obviously, I think the biggest game of the weekend here was the Ottawa-Hamilton game. You were there. I'll kind of give it to you first and foremost. Thoughts, and obviously, James checking in here already. Thoughts from Masoli, Ottawa. What do you have to say? You can start with the weekend. You can start with the game. How are you at?
Yeah, so I was there in attendance. It was, just such a heart-wrenching moment. Just the silence that was in the stadium. Obviously, Masoli himself has a very special relationship with Tiger Cats fans. He was there for a long time, not just as a starter, but he was there for a number of years as a backup. So he was really viewed as one of our own. And to see him go down, even as a player playing for the other team, it was just completely heart-wrenching. I mean, I was there when he got hurt in 2019 as well. That was, completely devastating because that looked like the year he could have won CFL MOP. And then, last year was just, we all know what happened last year with the Marino stuff. So, I mean, to see it happen again, third career, season-ending injury. So, I mean, it's going to be very hard for him to bounce back from that. I mean, at the end of the day, I don't think that we know exactly what the injury is at this point, like if he's out for the season for sure, but it did not look good. And especially when the team rules him out as quickly as they did, it's not a good sign.
Yeah, I was setting up. We had a wedding on Saturday, and I was setting up, and Andy Murray sent in the group chat. The win here is picking up. Andy Murray sent in the group chat and said, Masoli's leg looks effed, and I thought, oh, maybe he came back slow, or because we've kind of delayed him coming on. And then I said, wait, is this new? He goes, oh no, like he just went down again. And I obviously went back and watched the game yesterday, and it was really weird watching it. Like, okay, when's because you kind of know it's going to happen. Okay, what's going on here? Yeah, we have notes just coming in. CFL on TSN. Crum's going to start, and we can talk about Crum and all of that. The extent of Mandola's injuries, like Jason said, still unknown here. Evan, thoughts on this? Because you guys kind of lived through it real time, and then I kind of went back and kind of lived through this all on delay again yesterday.
Yeah, I mean, I'm glad we're addressing the elephant in the room first. It's extremely unfortunate to see Jeremiah Masoli get injured on what should have been a very, special day, a very happy day. Him coming back literally a year to the day since his last injury, which I think just makes this even more cursed and terrible. It's really hard to believe. And again, we don't really know the extent of his injury yet. The fact that he was ruled out right after he went down in the game was extremely alarming. And I'm at a point now where this, to me, at least seems, he's going to go on the 6-game injured list at least, minimum, I think. And, to me, if a lot of people were saying it was his Achilles, and if that's true, obviously that's going to be a season-ending injury. So at this point, he turns 35 in August, and that means, if he plays another CFL season after this, he'll be 36 next year at the end of next season. So you're really starting to look at, a possibly career-ending situation, and it's a very real chance that we might have just seen Jeremiah Masoli play his last snaps in the Canadian Football League. So that's pretty devastating to say, and especially for me, Jeremiah Masoli was one of the first guys that I really knew in the CFL because he was with Hamilton for such a long time, and just such a great guy, great player, but of course even better man, and he went through so much mental hardship, I think, through this past injury that he had, dealt with this year and had some surgeries. And I think there might have been a setback of some sort. Reminded me a lot of Alex Smith on the Commanders. And I know obviously this wasn't as extreme and he wasn't going to lose a leg or anything like that. But again, there was a lot of discussion around the mental aspect, and the video went up on the Red Blacks, social media stuff. And they, you could see Jeremiah, he was visibly, emotional talking to the team, before he went back to that game, especially going back to Hamilton again. There was just so much there to unpack. So yeah, bottom line here is the injury was incredibly unfortunate and wasn't fair at all. It's just so heartbreaking, really, is the bottom line.
Yeah, I sent out. Like I said, I was working. I did send out my tweet. I said, Garrett Marino here. If anyone, send him the double bird salute for me, because he's obviously blocked me. And I don't think it's a non-zero where you rehab one leg the entire season. Come off, not playing everything, come back into the game, and then have an injury in your other leg. That's that. And there was discussions that went into that below here, but. I do attribute that, and being out for the season, and that was a dirty hit last year. And obviously we've seen that this year with Seresna and everything else. And I think there was a certain attitude that came along with the Marino one that I think that rubbed people more the wrong way than just a dirty hit. It was kind of the flippant kind of WWE attitude of like trying to get heel heat on that. But I attribute these two together. And I don't think that if that happens last year, I don't think that, clearly this isn't happening now. But anything else on the actual injury, Jason? I mean, we can talk the game and everything else in Crum, but anything else on Masoli?
Well, I will say that I think it was more like almost a non-contact kind of injury. Kind of just slipped there, and that's the scary part about it. When that kind of happens, like, it's usually a pretty serious injury.
Yeah, no, really bad. Non-contact is obviously the worst. It was like that. What was it? A couple years ago in the Rough Riders when they came back from like the delayed start and everyone was popping their Achilles heels in that. Whether it was like that one practice game where like the three riders popped their Achilles. It's like, okay, let's stop this. So we have the game here. I guess we can start with that. 13-21, kind of a weird game. Crum comes in. I think he kind of gets the backup quarterback kind of bump, right? Like, okay, this guy comes into the game, played good, scrambled. Oh, I did want to mention too, I was texting with Dwayne Ford, who was on the show, obviously the Friday show, kind of previewing all this. And Dwayne echoed kind of, Jason, what you said as well. Just really scary moment and probably one of the emotional that he's seen kind of taking part in that. But Crum comes in here, plays decently. Evan, I know that you were high on his performance. Like I said, I feel like it might be a little bit more of, it was like when BJ Daniels came into that XFL Dragons game when Silvers got pulled. Like, okay, we're not expecting this. He's kind of running around the field. But what did you make of Crum?
Yeah, I was impressed by Crum. I think if you take away the 2 interceptions, he had a very great performance, especially in his first CFL game where he really saw, action like that, where he could control the offense. And, especially on the ground too, I think he had 6 carries for 91 yards. And unfortunately, he wasn't able to run it into the end zone at the very end when it mattered most. But, I thought it was pretty impressive, and he still managed a rushing touchdown. And that's good because it was just announced this morning that he was going to start next week. And I think if you want to talk about Ottawa's current quarterback situation in general, I think we're pretty much out on Arbuckle at this point, just given his performances prior to Tyree Adams coming in. My personal opinion, I think you just have Crum as the guy from now on. I think he showed enough potential in this game, and maybe I'm sure they're going to bring in someone behind that. I think the 2 top options right now, 3 Down put out an article this morning or last night, sometime recently. The 2 top options, at least in my opinion, and both of them were in this article. Jake Dunaway, the quarterback from Sacramento State, who I interviewed last year. He was someone that was in training camp with the Red Blacks, played a bit in the preseason. And then Tyrell Pigrome, who was with Winnipeg for a couple games earlier in the season, who got released because of the Dakota Prukop situation. I think he could come in and, both of those guys could be a backup to Dustin Crum down the stretch, assuming, Crum performs well and can sort of maintain a starting job. I think what's most impressive about his performance is he was signed like September of last season, somewhat late. And the fact that he's coming in and doing this, at the beginning of year 2, like he doesn't even really have a full, sort of CFL season under his belt because he came in at the end of last year. So to see him come in and, really put on a show and make things close at the end, I thought that was great. If you're, a Red Blacks fan, I think that's all you can really ask for at this point, just given, how much hardship your team has had and just seeing all the struggles continue. You have to find positives. And I really do think Dustin Crum was one of them.
Well, that's the thing is, we just had the Tyree Adams injury here where you're like, worst case, like, okay, Masoli's, this is horrific. And okay, at least we can go back. And obviously, I think it was the Ceresna hit that kind of took him out. Jason, what do you make of this? Because I think there's a lot of different ways. I mean, obviously, that we could go here in terms of the quarterback situation.
Yeah, so I mean, I think it's going to be kind of a wait and see thing with the quarterback position in Ottawa. I think they're probably going to give Crum a couple of weeks to see if he can follow up that pretty strong performance from how he played in Hamilton. I thought the first thing I noticed about him is, man, this guy's got some wheels, and I think that it really presented a lot of challenges to the Tiger Cats defense. Now, was that the Crum playing well, or was that the Tiger Cats defense continuing to struggle like they have so far this season? We'll have to wait and see, but I think Crum did very well, placed in a very difficult position to come in cold off the bench like that. I bet he didn't expect to see any action in this game other than maybe short yardage. So at the end of the day, I think he played well. I agree with Evan.
Yeah, it was crazy because obviously it's one of those things where he's coming in and like, it's almost like a war, right? Like you come in, you're like, okay, I just got to go. Like we got to get ball downfield. He had the run, the touchdown at the end of the first half, where I think it put them up by 1 after, which was like insane after everything to think that they could come back and do that. And then obviously trying to kind of have this run at the end here. And it's just so poetic how you imagine in his mind, as he's running, it's like, I'm going to be the hero here, right? I'm going to save the day. And they had just cut to the shot of Masoli here on the sidelines. And just how close it could have been. And it's so poetic. And obviously you can't, if this was, the movie version, right, he makes that touchdown and wins the game and gets carried off and it's the hero, but it's not, and it's real life. And I just thought it was really crazy that it came down to this very similar, like I said, play where he got the touchdown the first half, here you're 2 yards short, and then it's kind of all for naught, but really incredible. And I think a lot of courage should go to him. Anything else from him? I have some more notes on the game. Anything else on Dustin here, Evan? Evan or Jason?
No, I think we've pretty much discussed. I mean, again, I'm more interested to see what happens behind Dustin Crum. But like Jason said, I do think they're going to give him a couple weeks. At this point, you're kind of just in this experimental phase. I think it really shows just how much of a shame it is that they lost Tyree Adams to that injury on that shot from Jake Ceresna. And, it's a shame. I never really talked about that play much, but I'm a pretty big Jake Ceresna fan. But, too many times now we've seen, these injuries to quarterbacks on low hits and things like that. And it's a real shame. It's what, ended Masoli's season last year. And now it's ended Tyree Adams' season, who was much less proven than Masoli, but was still showing a lot of promise there, for Ottawa after Arbuckle. So I think that's where we're at with that.
Yeah, I feel bad, Jake. I think I said last week, he was on the show last year when they were honoring, I believe it was his father or something with his family. They were doing an event with the Elks. So here we get on the W side here, Jason, with your Ticats. I have thoughts, but I want to hear from you because obviously you were there. It certainly seems like we're kind of doing a different offense now. We're actually running the ball. We signed, one of the greatest running backs right now, James Butler, utilizing him. What'd you make of Schultz and the rest of the team?
Well, for Schultz, I think he has definitely been an improvement over what we've seen from Bo those first couple of games of the season. So I think that's an improvement from that perspective. I think they're still having a lot of problems in the red zone. I mean, the one touchdown that they had was kind of a long catch and run. So I think they still need to execute better down there. But I mean, still baby steps for this team. It's almost like deja vu. Last year, they got their first win over Ottawa by the skin of their teeth. I think it was like a missed field goal on the last play. Otherwise, Ottawa would have won. So at the end of the day, just another win at the gun against Ottawa for their first win of the season. And I think, going forward for the Tiger Cats, I think there's still some positive signs you can build on, but I'm not too overly optimistic about this team still going forward because I'm still seeing some of those issues. And if they had lost this game, it would have been pretty embarrassing, I think, given the situation Ottawa was going through.
Yeah, I mean, you look at both sides of that, where it would have been this heroic, rise for Dustin Crum here running in. Where, yeah, you look from Hamilton's side, like our team lost their starting quarterback to this, horrific, could be career-ending injury here, and then they're able to rally and come back. I mean, we beat him by a touchdown. Hamilton, I had notes on here. Yeah, reevaluating the offense, right? I think we're finally moving away from kind of the June Jones, right, and all of that, and getting. They said that they're okay. We're using the bye week. We're figuring all this out. I don't know why we didn't come into the season. I guess they thought Bo was going to throw a lot more on that. Penalties from Hamilton on special teams. Is that a Reinbold issue? Is that a player issue, Jason? What do you make of that? Because they had like 2 different time count on like kicking field goals or punts, whatever.
Yeah, and I think they also got one on offense on like a 2nd and short. So I think, penalties in general have been a pretty big problem for the Tiger Cats to begin this season. I believe they're one of, if not the most penalized team in the CFL so far this season. So that's a great point. But at the end of the day, I don't think that it's that big of a deal. I think they'll sort those things out. I think Jeff Reinbold, specifically when you talk about special teams, I think Reinbold does a really good job with that unit, has a great track record. So I'm not too overly concerned with that. But the penalties in general, it's pretty bad.
Well, and even with Hamilton, because I'm watching the game, and when Ottawa had because it was like a minute 15 or whatever left. I'm like, how the hell does Ottawa even get the ball back here? And it's like Hamilton's so ineffective of even keeping the ball to give. To me, that shouldn't even happen. It's like BC gets the ball back against Montreal, we put the game on ice. Like you should be able to do that. Yes, Scott's checking in. Could MBT be an option for Ottawa? We've talked about it. I mean, I don't know. I had a lot of tweets about it and okay, what's the USFL contract situation, all that kind of stuff. I mean, MBT just played 11 weeks of professional football here. I mean, Evan, do you think that's a realistic expectation or a probability?
You can't rule it out. I don't think you can rule it out because, MBT had great success in the CFL. And, I'm not, to be honest, I'm not sure how he feels about the USFL. I never really heard much from him on that end or about it. But I don't see why you could leave the door open, I guess is what I'm trying to say. Personally, I don't see it. I think he's going to stay in the US. I mean, he moved there, to be with his family and everything like that. So it would be hard for me to picture him coming back to a team like Ottawa where they're rebuilding. I understand you can get some money, you can get some reps. It's a long season, but I don't know. I mean, he's 34, going on 35 or whatever. He might be at a point where he's just ready to settle down. So again, personally, I don't see it, but you can never rule anything out. I mean, I'm sure they've probably reached out to him, I assume so.
Well, wasn't it Mike Mitchell was saying in our group chat, like he feels like those communications have started and McLeod's close with Masoli and Sean Burke wants to be kind of aggressive in all of this. Like I said, I get these messages a lot of, okay, well, can this guy, why didn't they get to go back to the CFL? Or why? I'm like, I would like to normalize treating football players as humans and McLeod just imagine just getting done, playing a professional football season. Oh yeah, let's just move back up to Canada. Maybe he can do it later in the season, right? Maybe you kind of see can Dustin can we keep the ship afloat here, kind of how Vernon did with BC last year? Can we kind of keep it afloat? And then maybe McLeod comes in after Labor Day, kind of take the month of August off. I could see that where, maybe we don't need you the whole season. And they say that the CFL season doesn't really matter to Labor Day anyway, which I would think is an odd marketing ploy. But, maybe you bring him in after Labor Day. Maybe he gets to take the summer with his family in Atlanta and then come up after that. Jason, anything else? Ticats, Red Blacks. I'm looking here. They are, they got Winnipeg. They're at home against Winnipeg. I don't know if they're going to keep that winning streak alive here. Anything else, Jason, on the Ticats?
I wanted to mention that Tyreek McAllister playing in his first career CFL game that provided a really big spark for the team, both on the return game and then obviously he had that long catch and run. So I think he's a guy that's going to be featured in that offense going forward, brings a lot of speed to the table. So I was pretty impressed by him. And one other guy I wanted to mention is Mark Leggio. He's off to a pretty good start for the Tiger Cats, kicking the ball. I think he made all of his field goals so far, except for that one extra point. Doesn't really count as a field goal, but I think Leggio's had a pretty strong start for being a pretty maligned player with his time with the Bombers.
We will have lots of kicking to talk about here when we get to the Edmonton game. I think we'll be funny. It is crazy to me though. You got Mark Leggio, we've got the faithful guy, we've got Chris Blewett over in the USFL. We have a lot of really weird, we got a really weird kicker names. Mark Leggio is certainly one of the ones. Yeah, I love that. All right, so let's move on here. I guess we can, if we're winning, we'll go all through this. I watched most of this game on mute. We were top golfing with my brother for his 30th birthday. We wanted to keep an eye on my boy Vernon here against Cody at home at BC Place. I know there was a lot of issues about like the attendance, and I saw Matt Baker tweeting that out, but 20,000 and change attendance there at BC Place. Evan bounced back. Vernon only the one interception, didn't throw 6, so obviously better than last week. What did you make of Vernon here, Evan?
Yeah, I thought this was a great sort of bounce back from his 6 interception game in Toronto. Although I will say, I think it might have been the second or third play of the game. He had a pick 6 that was called back, and I really wonder, had that not been called back, what the outcome of that game would have looked like. Because, to be honest, I didn't really see the need for the penalty there. I forget specifically what it was, but I don't know. That one could have gone either way. So he might have got bailed out there again. All love for Vernon, but it was interesting how the commentators were like, oh, he's shaking it all off from last week. And then third play of the game, it's like, oh, there's another one going back. Again, fortunately, it was, it didn't count. But other than that, I mean, yeah, he had a very solid performance. And I will say, just staying on the topic of BC's offense as a whole for a minute, Sean Shivers, the running back, I thought, him in place of Taquan Mizell was extremely impressive, especially in his first real CFL game. So, what that tells me is that BC has extremely good running back depth, despite losing James Butler to Hamilton, which was considered a really big loss for that team offensively, and for good reason. And then looking at the receiving department again, we've talked ad nauseum just about how diverse this receiving core is. Personally, I think Keon Hatcher is making a case now to be like the most valuable receiver on this team, next to Dominic Rhymes. Personally, Dominic is probably my favorite. And then I'd say, the other guy there too, Lucky Whitehead. I'd say honestly, Keon might have taken over Lucky Whitehead in terms of value. And I know Whitehead was the guy that was talked a lot about last year. I had an opportunity to see him. He was sort of a breakout player. But this year, I feel like there's just so many receivers now, and you have guys like Justin McInnes, coming, and Javon Catoy and whatever. There's just so many targets that it's kind of hard to. There's no real number one receiver. And that's why I say, this guy might be the best, but it's next to this guy and slightly ahead of this guy. You know what I mean? But overall, again, another great performance from BC. They're right back on track, 4-1. That's probably the best start you could ask for, especially with all the questions that they had going into this season.
BC, and I've said before, like, piggybacking on what Evan said with kind of this, you have this whole cast of wide receivers. And I just think when BC is running, they just feel so cool to me right now. And I don't know if it's like the ex-NFL thing with a lot of these guys, but, like Katoy's going into the end zone and he's like, it feels, I like that energy. It feels very marketable to me and cool, just in the way, like when BC's rolling and if they're putting up points. And I know last week, but when we had 45 against whoever, week before last, like when we're rolling against Winnipeg, like when they're rolling, it feels very cool. Jason, thoughts on BC's offense here? Or anything else with BC?
Yeah, so I had the same point as Evan. I was going to say you can't really slow this offense down because they have so many playmakers. I mean, if somebody has an off game, then there's somebody else to step up and take his place. I mean, Javon Catoy was huge in this game. I mean, they said it on the broadcast, but he's the closest thing in the CFL that we have to a tight end type body. And I think that's very accurate. And I think he presents a lot of matchup nightmares. I think they said he's caught every single target he's been thrown his way so far this season, which is pretty remarkable here in week 5. So, I mean, this offense is just so dynamic. I mean, Vernon Adams doesn't have to play perfect with the way that these receivers are playing. I think that specifically with this game, there's a couple of plays that really swung this game in BC's favor. Obviously, that interception that you alluded to, Evan, on the first play of the game, first series of the game that was called back, but also a blocked field goal that when it was a one possession game, BC blocks the field goal, returns it for a touchdown. That really blew the game wide open. And I think that's what BC was able to come away with the victory here.
Well, yeah, because you had the trading, right, where you had the blocked, it was the blocked punt to go in, and then the VC and be able to run it back for the pick six. Like, even if we do make that mistake, like, we're good enough here that we can go back. I thought it was funny, too, the Sean Shivers, which there was an old computer game. If anyone ever played Shivers, that was an old computer, like a Mist kind of. Did you ever play any of that where you were going through like the haunted museum or whatever? It was kind of like Mist back in the day, but he had that fumble, even that, like, okay, we fumble at the 1 yard line, Montreal's running it back, and they had the quote here. I just had it pulled up, but he said, "My mom is going to be mad." I thought that was funny, him talking to Farhan about that. But he was good, just getting elevated with Mazel going down. But like Evan said, kind of the depth on that. I wanted to say Evan had his, well, we're bringing up famous people tweeting here. Evan, high on Fajardo here, 11, perfect at half. Evan, thoughts on your boy Cody Fajardo here as we are in the Saison de Cody Fajardo?
Yeah, I mean, look, this was not a great game if you're Montreal. They haven't had much success playing in BC for a long time. But yeah, Cody Fajardo, again, I still thought he played a nice game. Didn't throw any interceptions, nearly threw for 300 yards, was effective on the ground, averaging 7.1 yards per carry. So I thought that was, worth pointing out. And then just as that whole Alouettes offense as a whole, how many times have we mentioned Austin Mack, in the past 5 weeks? He's continued to shine. And then there were a couple new guys in that receiving core that stepped up this week, specifically Tyler Snead and Courtney Davis, who I believe played at Texas A&M. He's in his first year in the CFL, and he had a really big, impressive catch kind of down the sideline over one of the BC defenders. So good to see him get some work in. And then there's one player that I've never properly given a shout out to on Montreal, but just wanted to take a minute to say, about Chandler Worthy. We talk a lot about, sort of CFL returners, and Janarian Grant from Winnipeg always comes up. But personally, I think, Chandler Worthy is someone where it's like every time I'm looking at him on the TV, I can't look away. Every time Montreal, is about to return and he's there. I mean, he had some explosive runs in this game, didn't run any back for touchdowns, but he's done that, plenty of times before. I think he had 2 in one game last season. So just wanted to, take a minute to, say thanks to him for his, efforts and everything. Not that I'm a Alouettes fan, but just super fun player to watch, and it makes the league more dynamic, I think.
Thoughts on the Alouettes, and then I have a follow-up question for you, Jason.
Yeah, so I'm glad you brought up Chandler Worthy, because I wanted to talk about the Alouettes special teams. They had so many penalties on special teams in this game. I thought that was really crucial for them. They had a couple of big returns by Worthy that were wiped out. So Worthy actually had a much better game than the stats show. But I mean, at the end of the day, if you're just taking, holding penalties on every punt return, that's going to set you back, because as Paul Lapalisse actually pointed out on the halftime for TSN, if you're taking a penalty there, you're not just losing the yards that you gained, but you're losing those yards, plus you're losing 10 from where you caught the ball. So, I mean, the really crucial penalties in the CFL game, field position just so crucial. And then the other thing I wanted to talk about was, when it comes to Cody Fajardo, I think the biggest thing is that he looks very healthy right now. And I think at the end of the day, mobility is a big part of his game. And it's good to see him healthy, because he is a completely different quarterback when he has his legs available to him.
Well, that was going to be my follow-up question here and watching, because I love Cody. I love the Alouettes. That's my team of the East. I'm sorry for the Hamilton Ticats here, but seeing him play here now 5 weeks now going in, I compared to Trevor Harris, who, and like they always say, okay, like Trevor Harris is the most accurate and he's the quick thinker, whatever. I think Cody is maybe not as accurate, as good of a passer, but his legs and mobility, like where it was such a terrible situation last year for him in Regina. Like, would you take Cody over Harris if you had, if he had more protection and more time? Like, it feels like Cody is a better quarterback right now than Trevor Harris, even though obviously Saskatchewan has a better record. Like, Jason, who would you take there?
I would still take Trevor. I think he has more of a track record. I mean, maybe he doesn't have as high as a ceiling as Cody Fajardo did it back in 2019, won West MOP. But at the end of the day, I do trust Trevor Harris more going forward still.
Evan, thoughts on that? Would you take Trevor or Cody?
Yeah, that's a difficult question. I'm glad you brought that up. That's a fun one. I'm gonna go Cody Fajardo here. Gonna go against the grain. I agree with Jason though. I think Trevor is like the proven vet. Someone you can count on. I just think Cody, again, when he's healthy and when he's in the right situation with the right people, I think he really can produce. And I'm not saying that necessarily happened this game, because there were a couple things I thought he could have done better, and I could probably say that about the previous 4 weeks too. But I still have belief in Montreal, and a lot of that is from Cody Fajardo. A lot of it too, again, is from their receiving core. We've talked about that already. But if we're just looking at Cody Fajardo specifically, I think he does bring a lot to this team, and it definitely gives them sort of a refreshed look. And what I think I mean by that is I feel like Cody will last longer in Montreal than Trevor will in Saskatchewan. Maybe I'll be wrong. Maybe I'll be proven. I'm sure now that I've said that, of course, it won't happen. But that's just my take on it. I'm not. I like both. I just think Cody has a tiny bit more upside, but ultimately they are both very, I'd say, upper tier quarterbacks, above average. They're not Vernon Adams or Chad Kelly, but they can, guide a team to, win when needed.
I don't know. I like Cody. I think, like I said before, he feels a little more swole this year. It feels like when Colby came back on Survivor, and it was a little more. I'm a little older, a little more swole on here. Talking Vernon, just the kind of getting back to, obviously not throwing 6 interceptions is going to do better anytime, but scrambling more, running more. Like Vernon is not that pocket passer, and I think that last game against the Argos, trying to do that and kind of dice down the field there with the ball. I don't know if it's his mental whatever or kind of reading everything, but him running more is going to, I think, improve that quality of that. Jason, I felt watching the game this time, it felt like they were trying to rely more on his legs. Did I imagine that, or are we getting back to that?
No, I think the big thing is it's not necessarily running to run. It's running around in order to make a big pass down the field. He does that so well, and I think that's something that he needs to utilize in his game. He's one of the best players in the CFL at doing that.
Yeah, I just I don't know. It feels to me in entirely different situations, but like we brought Russell Wilson into the Broncos, and like, okay, we're gonna have him like stand in the pocket and pass. Like that's not Russell Wilson. That was never. If you watch him in Seattle, that's not his gameplay. I don't know why we were trying to do that, and it feels the same here. Like we have Vernon. He's athletic. Let's let him run around. Evan, any other thoughts on that? And then I had Matthew Betts as well, continuing. I think he's broken his own personal record last year of sacks in 5 games right now. Really looking crazy on that. Anything else about the Lions here, Evan?
Yeah, I was going to touch on their defense a bit too. Obviously, yeah, Matthew Betts was someone they talked about at nauseum kind of on the broadcast, just because of how dominant he's been this season. I believe he had 7 sacks in 18 games last year, and now he's up to 8 through 5 games, which, I mean, at this rate, it looks like he's going to be the CFL sack leader. I don't have the stats in front of me to see who else is coming close. Because I do typically look at more offense than defense. That's just who I am. But the other guy too, Jalen Edwards-Cooper, although he made his big play on special teams, he had 6 tackles for loss. Thought that stood out. And a fun fact about him, I noticed he played at Texas A&M Commerce, which was a Division II school, and that's also where Kader Kohu of the Miami Dolphins played, who was one of the top undrafted free agents last season. Had a really good rookie year with them. So I thought that was kind of just an interesting connection to see those guys, doing cool things in 2 different leagues. So, yeah, shout out to Jalen Edwards-Cooper. That was a very electric play. I think we can all agree on that when he returned the blocked field goal for the touchdown, and definitely put BC, I think, again, sort of in that position to, take over in the second half, because I think there was only about 3 minutes left in the second quarter when that happened.
Jason, anything else on this one? And then I have a funny comment before we move on to the next game.
Nothing more from me, really. I think we got our bases covered with this one.
I thought it was funny. I saw a couple of videos, and so we had the Rorkin family here coming back, and they're like, "See, like Nathan still loves us." Like we were an unexpected detour. He didn't want to be here, but Nathan still loves us. So I did love that they posted this. I lots of videos, and Nathan tweeted out, "You cropped out his wife." So Nathan was there with Miss Rourke here getting ready for that. But I did think that was funny. Like, the like the hometown kid, whatever, returning back to college. Like, see, like we still matter. Nathan's here watching the game, but that was good. I'm glad. I'm glad. Let's get on. We'll do all that. We'll get to the next game here. Like I said, this was the one that was not available on CBS Sports Network. So unfortunately, my coverage of this was slightly limited. Jason, do you want to start with this? Calgary at Winnipeg here. Winnipeg continuing to go.
Yeah, so the story with this game is that Calgary came out, punched Winnipeg in the mouth in the first half. I believe they were up 11-1 at one point. But at the end of the day, Winnipeg just responded in the second half with a really dominant performance, really put the clamps down defensively. There was a big clock-killing drive when Winnipeg had the lead in the fourth quarter. I believe it was like 10 minutes or so. So that really just illustrated that Winnipeg, just has the physicality and the mental fortitude to win these games against Calgary. I think they've won like 10 in a row against Calgary or something crazy like that. Calgary usually comes close. They play Winnipeg well, but at the end of the day, they just can't close in these matchups.
Mayor here. I wanted to shout out. So, Ryan Ballantyne, friend of the show here, came on and he tags me and all this kind of stuff now. And he had his article up in 3 Down talking about kind of Mayor continuing to struggle. We haven't really figured out. Is it trying to, come into place? But what do you make here, Jason? Is it, I saw comments on it. Is it about play calling? Is it Mayor? Like, what do you attribute that to?
Well, I do think the play calling has declined in Calgary ever since Ryan Dinwiddie went over to take the head coaching job in Toronto. So I do think that's worth mentioning. But at the end of the day, Jake Maier just has to play better. I think there's just nothing that is down the field with this passing game. It's very dink and dunk, and even then, he's missing some really easy throws. I mean, there were a couple throws in this game where you're like, okay, this is what the Stampeders saw in Jake Maier the last couple of years. He threw with anticipation, was under a lot of pressure in this game. But at the end of the day, I think that Maier did not play well overall. And I think it's very hard to win the CFL. Obviously, you guys know, if you cannot pick up first downs passing the ball. I think Calgary is great running the ball. We saw that in the first half, but at a certain point, a team is going to take that away from you, and you're going to have to throw for it. And I don't think Calgary has been able to prove that so far this season.
Yeah, I mean, 14-25 here, like, not setting the world on fire. Dedrick Mills had a day here, 14 carries for 97 yards. That was good. Evan, thoughts? I mean, it's just so weird. We really kind of anointed Jake as the heir apparent here, even was it 2 seasons ago, kind of coming into relief, and then last year taking over. Like, what do you make of Calgary? And I don't know what they do here.
Yeah, so I'll start with the Calgary side of the ball before we get into Winnipeg and just sort of the whole flow of the game. I had in my notes, I said, another slow outing for Jake Maier. And at this point, if you're a Calgary fan, I think you do have a right to be concerned about his play and, what the future looks like, the next steps. Am I saying they're going to make a quarterback switch? No, I don't think this is a situation where they need to do that quite yet. But after this game, the reality is, like, this was a winnable game for Calgary. If they had kept on that trajectory sort of from the first half and they didn't let Winnipeg pull away, it was very much in their grasp. And, for a minute there, I really thought they were going to pull it out. But obviously that hope went away very quickly as well. So, Dedrick Mills, another guy I had that you brought up, Reid, easily the best player for Calgary on offense, made this game, I think, really exciting. If you eliminate him from this offense, I think, to be honest, it would have just been a snooze fest. There's no other real term for it. There was a couple guys, though, in the receiving department. Trey Odoms-Dukes is someone I was really happy to see get involved, and I sort of think he's one of these, more underrated secret weapons, especially given the state of Calgary's receiving core. But it was good to see Reggie Begelton back in the fold. I think he had been out for a couple games injured, so he came back there and had a couple catches. And then one thing that is really worth pointing out that was sort of an underrated storyline that I didn't really hear anyone else talking about was the return of Marken Michel to the receiving core after 4 years away in the NFL. Obviously, he had been there in 2018 and a couple years before that. It was a pretty quiet day for him, right? He had 1 catch for 11 yards on 6 targets. Again, got a lot of looks, but didn't really capitalize on a lot of them. That makes sense, your first game back in the CFL. But I think, I said it was quiet, but still wholesome, and another player that will hopefully be able to help Mayer down the line. And this morning there was just news that Calgary signed Julio Billingsley too, the tight end from Texas, who had played at Alabama, and he's going to switch over to receiver. Hopefully help them out. He was an XFL draft pick. So again, they're really trying to boost this receiving core, I think, in hopes that Mayer will sort of, open up. And I do agree with Jason. The play calling isn't perfect, right? I can't sit here and put all this on Mayer. I still think he is a very good quarterback with a lot of upside, despite the slower start to the season. But yeah, I mean, something's got to change soon, right? I mean, this team, I wouldn't say they're in a dire position, but just given their history, I mean, there's a lot kind of riding on the line here.
Yeah, 1-3 here, second to last in the West after the Elks. Jason, any other thoughts? And then we can transition to Winnipeg. Any other thoughts on Calgary here?
Yeah, so I agree with Evan. It's the Stampeders have kind of lost prominence in the West Division over the past couple of years. I remember a few years ago, this was a team that was looked at every single year as the best team in the West Division, and it's just simply not the case anymore. They've been passed over by obviously Winnipeg, but also BC. Saskatchewan's got their stuff together so far this year. So at the end of the day, I mean, the Stampeders, it's kind of a troubling situation for them. I don't think that, they're completely out of it yet. Obviously, this is the CFL we're talking about. They're still very much alive for, if not a third place seed in the West, crossover position in the East Division. But I mean, it's not looking good for them so far. I think the biggest thing, like you said, Evan, is that the Stampeders need to get healthy in the receiving core, get a lot more playing time with those guys, get Mark and Michelle back in the fold. I think that will help them a lot. Maybe play some easier opponents might help them a little bit as well. But at the end of the day, I think the Stampeders could be in trouble here. And I made a video about that this week. Go check it out on my channel.
Yeah, Jason, I love kind of the preview stuff and the reaction stuff Jason does over there. Great stuff to check out kind of during the week as well. I think it's good because I get this is all I can bear. Like we get this, we do our Friday show. Jason, a little bit more flexible with that. I appreciate it. Switching here because I want to make sure we talk about the Rouge game before we get out. But Winnipeg, Caleros, 20-something of 20-something, throwing 200+ yards, 2 TD. Looked like a very kind of typical Caleros, a clean game here. Stat line, Evan, thoughts on Winnipeg continuing to kind of roll here?
Yeah, just going back to my notes, I mean, I just said another well-rounded kind of textbook performance from Winnipeg. You really know what to expect from them at this point. The only thing I would really point out is that they maybe haven't been scoring as many points still as I would have hoped, and they definitely had a slow start. But again, like they got the job done. Caleros had like his typical, like you said, completing 20-something passes, for 200-something yards, 2 touchdowns, just a typical normal day. Brady Oliveira carrying the rock, only averaging 4.9 yards per carry, which is decent, didn't score, but I think we've talked before about how he's kind of a workhorse in a way. And then on defense for them, the one guy that it was nice to see that had a pretty impressive game was Dietrich Nichols, the former Houston Roughneck, obviously, from the XFL, someone that I'll never forget. And then along with Malik Clements, too, I think had a really nice outing there as well. So, yeah, I mean, again, not much on the Winnipeg side. At this point, you just know, like, once they're on, they're on. Was it a perfect game for them? No. Was it still their standard? Probably not, but they won, by what, 13 points? So that's all right for me.
And you have famously USFL, former USFL Generals quarterback Dakota Prukop returning back up to the north here. I don't know, did he play last week or was this his first game back after the trade, Evan? Or not the trade, but him coming back.
I don't know. I read something that said Tyrell Pigrom played in or was active for 3 games, so I assume Dakota was active last week, but I could be wrong. I have a feeling this is the first action that he's got because I didn't notice him last week, but I could be wrong.
Jason, anything else here, Winnipeg?
Yeah, so I just think the Winnipeg was just a classic. They could beat you so many different ways. They don't have to play the perfect game like a lot of teams have to win games. So I think at the end of the day, they just play excellent complementary football. The defense is kind of making me eat crow over what I said a couple of weeks ago, that they were kind of declining a little bit back there. But the last couple of weeks, they played very well. So I think at the end of the day, things are going pretty well in Bomberland, and you know, it's interesting to see what happens going forward with this first place race with the Lions.
Yeah, Winnipeg's the kind of team where you have to play perfect to beat them, right? We saw BC really dismantle them a couple weeks ago, but yeah, they can be afforded a few mistakes here. I think BC is in that position, like we talked about, where hey, we can have the 1 yard, 1 yard line fumble and kind of all that, kind of rally a little bit. Obviously, we can't throw 6 interceptions, but Winnipeg, like we're allowed a little bit of okay, you came out hard, okay, well. We can turn this around. Last note I had with the 3 down article on here was, what are we thinking about this comparison? The away Calgary jerseys looking like a box of popcorn. I think they're hot. I think they're really hot jerseys, Jason, because I know Evan doesn't partake in any uniform shenanigans. So, Jason, any thoughts on the popcorn?
Yeah, so I think that I don't really critique the away uniforms in the CFL as harshly or in any sport, because there's not so much you could do with the white uniforms, I feel like. So I think I award a little bit of creativity here by the Stampeders. So I mean, I like the jerseys.
All right. So now we are finally here to the famous Rouge game. Now, I'm going to say this. So I was out Thursday night. My wife's birthday was Friday. I had weddings to work both Friday and Saturday. So I took my wife out Thursday night. I'm getting the score as this is going on. I'm like, okay, it's 1-0. Okay, it's 2-0. And I was sitting there and I'm like, if this was a USFL game, I might just have Pat. I might just let Pat, you can talk about this game when we come to the recap. I went back on demand. I watched this entire game driving to and from my weddings Friday and Saturday. So I did watch, and it was actually we'll get into it, but I thought it was actually a really entertaining game because the score and we're going in and Arash is tweeting and this is the definition of excellence. Arash is just going crazy about all this healing on the CFL. I didn't think this was that terrible of a game. I mean, the ending came down. Jason, am I out on a limb here? I mean, I thought this was actually pretty exciting for 11-12 on a Thursday night.
Yeah, I had fun enough time watching it. I feel like the fact that it was close definitely helped, and just the dramatic finish made this game one of the more memorable games so far this season.
Evan, did you catch any of this game on the Thursday?
I did. Yeah, I didn't watch the whole thing, but I watched the first half. So I didn't see the blunder at the end until I obviously went back, watched the highlights. I saw it all over Twitter and all that conversation. We'll get into that in a couple minutes here. I do want to talk about just the game itself first, aside from the Rouges and everything else that made it so interesting and really so close. I think my first note here, we'll talk about the Elks. Taylor Cornelius, to me, this was really the first game where he looked like a starting quarterback. Maybe that's being a bit harsh, but to be honest, I mean, prior to this, every performance he's had was, I mean, you can only say so many good things, right? And I really hope Taylor can continue this. I'm not trying to, sit here and, just say bad things about him, rip on him all the time. But really, this game stood out. I was like, okay, it's finally looking like after a little over a month, maybe they can have something here. And again, especially, it really came into play on the ground, right? Taylor. People talk about him having this big frame, and to see him be so mobile in this game, score, average over 5 yards a carry, carried multiple times, had 11 carries, to see him do that, I think should at least give Edmonton fans some confidence. Now, keep in mind, this could all, go on a landslide next week. Who knows, right? There's been so much inconsistency. But I really did like what I saw from Taylor Cornelius this week. Still had an interception. Still wasn't perfect. Could have gotten a couple more completions, I think. But ultimately, better stuff from him than what it's been. And I mean, because there really wasn't much before that. A couple other things. This was definitely a revenge game for some of the players on the Elks. Kyron Moore, who used to play for Saskatchewan on offense, and then AC Leonard, obviously, who played for Saskatchewan on defense. Both of them are now with the Elks, and both of them had, I would say, pretty noteworthy games this time around, especially AC Leonard. Again, one of those guys that I've known, one of the first names that I was familiar with in the CFL going back a couple years. So that was good. And then the run game, too, I think was the last thing I was going to point out. But besides the whole CJ Sims business, I think it was Kevin Brown. Again, him and Cornelius kind of, really combined. And from what I remember, Edmonton hasn't had much of a run game up until this point. They've just been trying to force feed to Geno Lewis and a couple other guys. They didn't have Geno Lewis in this game, by the way. But ultimately, there was improvement from Edmonton. Did they win? No. Could they have won? Yes. Another heartbreaker. Yeah, the main takeaway for me from this game, and I know I haven't talked about Saskatchewan yet or what happened at the end, but I'll wait for that. I think my main takeaway from this game was, there was so much heartbreak. I thought it couldn't get any worse. And then we saw that Hamilton-Ottawa game where Masoli went down, and it just kind of put a whole kind of sombering blanket of sorts on the weekend. It was still, I'd say, a good slate. I enjoyed the BC Montreal game and even the Winnipeg Calgary game, even though it was pretty clear, like by the third quarter, Winnipeg was going to pull it out. But again, it was these things like this where, those are the more sad storylines that you kind of just have to discuss, unfortunately, and accept if you're a fan of one of those teams, especially.
All right, Jason, go to you, and then I got some notes here.
Yeah, so I mean, I echo your sentiment, Evan, that that Cornelius played better in this game. But I think at the end of the day, I mean, even if he played better, it still wasn't good enough. At the end of the day, you put 11 points on the board. It's not going to win you very many games. And I mean, it could have won you this game. It's very close to winning you this game. But at the end of the day, just not good enough. I think what was huge in this game were the missed field goals by their kicker, Dean Faithful. Again, very controversial decision to go with him as their field goal kicker this season, given that he's a 36-year-old rookie that had never kicked in like a college or like a pro game before, I think. So, I mean, those are just missed points on the board. Those were enough to win the game right there. And I think he got 3 Rouges from 3 field goals. So at the end of the day, it was just a very disappointing effort from the Elks, even though, they came close to winning. I think that there's still so much to work on here that I can't be too encouraged by the performance. And I mean, I think that a couple of guys, like you said, AC Leonard had a really good game in this one. Lucas Purifoy is another former Saskatchewan Rough Rider that played pretty well for them in this game, has been playing pretty well for the Elks so far this season. But at the end of the day, it's the same issues. They can't move the ball consistently on offense. They can't stop the run. Saskatchewan was really attacking that in this game, even though they didn't come away with a ton of points. So I think the Elks still have so much to work on.
Yeah, it was crazy. So I just got a couple notes. So we'll get to the Rouge thing here because I have a bunch of funny tweets about that. But so first off, Taylor Cornelius only has 4 wins in the CFL. I thought that was remarkable. And I know, because we talked and it's only been a couple years, I'm like, to give the bag to this guy last year, and I love Taylor. We watched him in the XFL and all that, but to only have 4 wins. Shout out Trevor Harris, 100 career starts. So, that's pretty remarkable. Also, the fact that the Riders had 7 losses in a row at home before this. And I can't figure out how in the 9-team league we could have Ottawa, who now thankfully is one, but we had Ottawa, Edmonton, and Saskatchewan all with home losing streaks. I don't really understand how that's possible here with 9 teams. A couple other things. We're back to country. We had Fallout Boy introing the shows last week. And I said, for all you people saying that the CFL has demographic problems, we're playing 2006's Sugar We're Going Down. We're back to country here. And my other note I had, and then we'll get to the Rouge unless anyone else has anything. We even had a penalty on Chris Jones this week where it's like the Elks just, we're like, how else can we lose this game? Jones is on the white line, the ref throwing the flag, and then they show him the next play and he's still on the line. It's like, how do you not, we're done penalizing ourselves here. We're penalizing the coach. Evan, we'll go, Evan, any other thoughts on this? Because I want to get to the Rouge before we get out of here.
Yeah, so 2 things. One, I just wanted to clarify, is that score for the because I think it said Edmonton had 2 touchdowns, but that can't be right, can it?
No.
Yeah, there's mistakes all over this.
Yeah, that's what I thought. I was going to say. I've been very weary trusting this the past couple weeks because I looked and I'm like, there's no way Stephen Dunbar and Taylor Cornelius both scored in this game. Do you know which one it was? Who scored?
I'm trying to think.
Cornelius
I can't remember.
It was Dunbar had the Dunbar had the TD. Dunbar had the TD.
So Taylor didn't score a rushing touchdown. I mean, still an impressive game rushing, but yeah, that makes me wonder too because I said Jalen Edwards-Cooper in BC had 6 tackles for loss. That seems like a lot. And they had another player. It might have been on Saskatchewan. Said he had 8 tackles for loss. I'd have to. I don't know. Again, this is the best thing I have, so I'm going off this because I only watch chunks of all the games. So. Forgive me, and I think that speaks for all of us. It's a shame. I mean, you want to talk about the whole CFL stats? That's a whole nother debate. But I will talk about Saskatchewan here for a minute, even if the stats might not be exactly up to date or accurate. Not saying they've been in other weeks either. Let's see. Yeah, I didn't have too many notes here. Trevor Harris had a pretty nice game. Still had a turnover, but nearly threw for 300 yards. Averaged 10 yards per attempt, which I thought was pretty good. And then Mitchell Picton and Tevin Jones stood out in the receiving core. Tevin Jones especially I thought was interesting. He's had 2 separate stints with Saskatchewan. He came in 2021 and then signed with the Jaguars and then came back last year. Don't really know what his stats look like from last year or even this year, but this was the first time where I was like, oh, Tevin Jones, good to see him. He was kind of a NFL veteran, spent a couple years with the Steelers, and I think he's 30 going on 31 now, something like that. So older guy who's kind of still riding it out in Saskatchewan. And then Nick Marshall is someone who keeps impressing me. Kind of had the interception at the end to seal the win for Saskatchewan. That's always a name I've been hearing about for so long. It feels like ever since I think he joined the Rough Riders in 2018. I feel like ever since I started watching the CFL around that time, I've been hearing his name. I will never get over the fact that he played quarterback at Auburn instead of corner, and he was the quarterback for Auburn in that game in the Iron Bowl where they had that kick return. So always find that fascinating. That's how I remember who Nick Marshall is.
All right, so let's get here to the Rouge. I got a couple tweets here to kind of set this up, and then we can talk about it. We had Dave Campbell here talking. Elks score four Rouges tonight, and it's the Rouge that sinks him in the end. CJ Sims with a horrific gaffe at the end of the game. I can't believe this. The team finds new ways to lose. Farhan hopping on this, the Elks record notwithstanding, when something that ridiculous happens to determine the game, it makes the entire league look bad. That type of mental error simply shouldn't happen at any level. The last thing, a couple other, Chad Ochocinco checking in, watching the game. What an ending to the Edmonton Sask game. So I will play the replay here on the video, and I will toss to Jason. And Jason, you're the Canadian guy here. What do we make of this?
I just don't think there's any excuse. Like, I just think it's really silly to end a game like this. So it's like, I hate seeing this. I think BC and Toronto had a game in 2019 that ended with a guy accidentally stepping on the back of the end zone on a missed field goal to give up the 1 point to win the game. But this was even more bizarre than that. I mean, it makes me feel a little bit better about the Ticats giving up that 1 point in the Grey Cup a couple of years ago to Winnipeg. That would have potentially won them the game with a field goal. But I think that there's really no excuse for this happening. I blame the coaches for this more than anything. I think there should have been explicit discussions. There's no way that you let this ball go into the end zone under any circumstances, or you absolutely try to get it out of the end zone if it gets that far. So, I mean, I just don't think there's any excuse for it, but it's really, encapsulation of what the Elks have become over these past couple of years.
Yeah, we have a comments here across the pond just talking. And he pointed out it was the Cornelius 1 yard rushing touchdown, because it was the Dunbar one got called back for holding. I think that was this was Thursday. I've had 22 hours worth of wedding filming since Thursday, but it was the Dunbar one I believe got called back for holding. It was the Cornelius one that stood. We had a comment. Ryan is a Calgary person here, a longtime friend of the show. He says Edmonton just made the entire CFL look bad by allowing the team to win on the long field goal kick. Edmonton's football is amateur hour. Evan, does this make the CFL look bad? Because I see both sides. Like, well, see, this is why, because we had Winnipeg had the run back, right, where it was like ran back to the 30-yard line or whatever, kind of off the missed field goal. Does this make, because I get both sides, like, oh, this is the best thing about the CFL, or this is the worst thing?
Yeah, well, it's definitely a unique thing, right? We can start with that. I have had so much difficulty trying to explain the Rouge to people who I know here in the United States who don't watch the CFL. I think it's the weirdest thing. I personally like it somewhat because it's another scoring opportunity on special teams. And I think special teams is a super kind of important facet of football, regardless of league. But, there's been so many times where you just see these players who aren't, trained, and they come in from the United States. And I'm so glad you brought up the Grey Cup, Jason, because that's the first thing I thought about when I saw that play. I said, why does this look so familiar? Like, I feel like someone blundered like this before in a much more important setting. And then I was like, oh, that's right. Hamilton did it in the Grey Cup. And then, I've watched highlights of that BC Toronto game where, they pretty much lost on the Rouge. And, it's such a weird way to lose or win a game. I like to say it's very anticlimactic. I mean, you look at that whole game, there were so many Rouges, so many weird plays. It was such a weird night, and it just ends like that. And you know, in the NFL, like, you know, that's nothing. That's like a touchback, you know? So you look at that and it's like, okay, I just, it's so weird. Like, even though I've watched the CFL now for a handful of years, every time I see something like that, to think that a team essentially wins a game because of that is, I don't know what to say, really. It's just such a, you know, a unique, complex issue. I've heard so much debate between whether or not the Rouge is a good thing, or if it's just too complicated, or, you know, it makes the CFL Canadian. I don't know. There's so many different takes on it, but yeah, I was just stunned, honestly, that happened. And, you know, again, it's, if you're Edmonton, it's how many things can go wrong. You know, I mean, this is just so embarrassing is the bottom line. And I think CJ Sims, you know, the guy who, you know, had that play or let that play happen, admitted, he said the same thing. He's like, yeah, I was embarrassed. You know, I can't, like, you know, our team is, you know, the only winless team in the CFL now that Hamilton, you know, got a win, and obviously Ottawa got on the board against them. So, yeah, now Edmonton's still, you know, looking up, and it's like we've had a couple of these opportunities where if we just did these simple things right, you know, it wouldn't be a problem. But obviously that's in the past now, and I don't know. It's so weird to me. The whole thing is just so bizarre.
Well, yeah, but if this doesn't happen, we're not talking about this game in the same vein here. I think it's a pretty piss poor game. Jason, thoughts on this? Anything else?
Yeah, so I think it's not necessarily a reflection on the league. It doesn't necessarily make the league look bad. I think it just makes the Elks look bad. And again, I think it's just an encapsulation of what they've become over the past couple of years, specifically how badly they've begun this season, just the little things that they're not doing right. In terms of the Rouge itself, I think that I like it depending on the situation. I think the thing is, I hate when it goes through the back of the end zone and you get a point on a short missed field goal. I think that is stupid. I think it should be a returnable ball. I think that is, you know, an amendment that the CFL can make to make the Rouge a little bit more better. But I think situations like this, I think it's completely fine. I just think it was a boneheaded mistake.
All right, we'll start to wrap up here. We'll get out of here soon. I don't want to, you know, hammer down on CJ Sims anymore, but, you know, he was kind of the standout all season. We said, man, God, the Elks, at least their returner, you know, Purfoy and everything else there. Going in here, Argos on the, they're back. BC is on the bye this week. That's right. Okay, Argos on the bye. BC here. Hamilton at Edmonton. We'll see. I don't know. Is Schultz enough? Is Edmonton going to write that? Or we got Toronto here at Montreal. I think that's a good game here. Friday night. Winnipeg at Ottawa. That's a little scary. Calgary at Saskatchewan. That might be exciting here. I don't know. This is an interesting week here. Evan, what game are you looking at? And then we'll go to Jason. We'll get out of here.
Yeah, definitely looking at that Saturday finale, Calgary at Saskatchewan. I think this is a must-win game for Calgary at this point, especially given the standings. You know, Saskatchewan is there at third in the West, and Calgary really needs to kind of start climbing up soon if they want to be in playoff contention. So getting a win over Saskatchewan, who is currently in that third spot, I think is extremely beneficial for them.
Jason, what game are you eyeing at here? And I would like to know your thoughts also, if it's not this game, about the Hamilton game.
Yeah, so I'll start with that. I'm genuinely terrified as a Ticats fan that we're going to be the team that gives the Elks their first home victory in, 4 years. So, I mean, I'm kind of scared from that perspective, but I think I don't think that's the number one game this week, as you guys pointed out. I'm too looking forward to Calgary, Saskatchewan. I think those two teams always play really good games when they play together. Obviously, an overtime game in week 3. So I think that's going to be an excellent game. It's going to be interesting to see if Montreal can give Toronto that first L on Friday night. But I think this is a pretty good slate. Looking forward to next week.
Yeah, don't have to worry about BC here losing. It's saying my internet connection's unstable here, so hopefully I'm coming through all right. The same position as every week, but I'm getting the error. There we go. Going the way, getting the error messages here. We'll wrap this up. Yeah, I'm excited for that. I think the Toronto game will be good. This is scary. Ottawa, you're on the ropes. You got Dustin Crum. I don't know if, Winnipeg defense is maybe the best thing you want for your start coming off the bench, not coming off the bench. You want your first official start, but it is interesting that is his last name is Crum, and kind of like, Crum, here we are back, but should be good. This was exciting. Like I said, I'm trying to get out of the way here to watch these games as much as possible. So I appreciate everyone checking it out. I appreciate Evan every week for coming on as the schedule allows. Means a lot. We're excited to do the Grey Cup and everything else. And then obviously Jason here every week and then doing all his other content and stuff on there. Anything else from either of you guys before we get out of here? We're good. All right, guys, like and subscribe. This was a fun one. I think we're going to have, he was supposed to come on last week. I think Naylor's coming on this week. We're going to talk with Nails on Friday. And then I want to get a welfare check with Tim Baines as well. And then I have some emails to write to the XFL office today as well. So hopefully it should be a good show on Friday. Like and subscribe, and obviously Jason's channel as well. Where's my thing? All right, we'll get out of here. Thanks, you guys. See ya.